I'm so excited to have you back on. And I just, we were talking so much about what we could, dive into with Ayurveda and like
Mm.
diving deeper into
Yeah.
understanding, how to use some of these tools and principles and all the vast information that you have.
Yeah, definitely. And it is such a vast and elusive concept. And yeah, I think my work is really going into breaking down and simplifying these concepts and putting them in really practical form so that, people at home who aren't going to go and study a 2-year diploma of Ayurveda and things can actually start to utilize this wisdom. So I'm really excited to be talking to you about it today and just breaking it down and making it really practical and giving people tools and things that they can actually start implementing in their daily life.
We can just dive in.
So the word dosha actually translates to energy. So I kind of think of them as functional forms of energy. But before we look at that, we kind of need to look at the elements. So we've got the 5 great elements. It's called the Panchamahabhutas. So we've got air or space, ether, fire, water, and earth. So Ayurveda believes that everything on earth, everything in our planet, our solar system, the cosmos, everything is made up of varying combinations of these 5 great elements. Everything from a rock to a bird, the earth, ourselves, and they also show up in our body in all sorts of different ways. So air we can obviously see as our prana, our lungs, our life force, which actually gives us life. Fire is our metabolism, our digestion. It's our ability to burn off and transform. Earth is our bones and our skeletal structure. So you can actually start to see these elements prevalent in our bodies and in our environment. They come into different dominance throughout different seasons. So these 5 elements are very practical, very logical structures of, everything on earth, all life. So the doshas are actually just forms of those. So Vata dosha is made up of air and space. So it's very light, very buoyant. If you think, you can start to apply some practical knowledge to it. So if you think of an air element, it's very light, it's sort of up in the clouds. So things that aggravate Vata are things like travel, flying, restlessness when you're really in your head and you're sort of running around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's like all that air. Like I just think head in the clouds, like anxiety, insomnia, all those things that come from being really ungrounded. That's the Vata dosha. And then Pitta is made up of the fire element. So fire element is, you just think about fire, it's blazing, it's hot, it's transformative, it can be destructive. So in terms of, digesting our food, it can, it can remove the things that we don't want, it can assimilate the things that we do want, and it can burn off not only what we ingest, but also our thoughts, our emotions, anything that our 5 senses come into contact with. Pitta is responsible for burning off and transforming, keeping what we want, taking the nutrients and the experiences that serve us, burning off and letting go of the ones that don't. So it's really powerful. It can go out of balance. And if it does, you kind of see things where you are experiencing lots of heat in the body. So reflux, indigestion, diarrhea, like hot flushes, acne, things like the fire bubbling up to the surface,
Would it be
really intense perspiration and BO.
interesting? Would it be like inflammation of the body?
Yes, it is. It's inflammation. But then there's also, when we've got water retention and more of that puffiness, that's actually more kapha. So kapha is earth and water elements. So when we've got stagnation, swelling, edema, that sort of more fluid-based inflammation is more kapha. And kapha is the really heavy dosha. So it's earth and water. So it's stagnant, it's stable. I always think of muddy boots, like gumboots stuck in the mud, where it's like literally in the earth element, but it's a bit sludgy, very stable, very stuck. So it can be hard to get things going. In the body, we're looking at things, like congestion, all that extra water, puffiness around the eyes, edema, swelling, more sort of constipation, where we're just holding on and not letting go. But on the adverse side of that, there is a sense of stability and a sense of structure. So what we can do with the knowledge of the doshas is start to use them as problem-solving tools. So if you're someone who's got too much vata in the body, your head's in the clouds, you can't finish projects, you get really confused, you're just like, where's my keys? Walking out the door, going back in 3 times to get all the things, you can see your head's quite in the clouds.
Right.
So to balance that out, you need more earthiness, more grounding, something to pull you from being in the clouds back into your body. So if you think of those muddy boots, that kapha, that's going to really bring you back down to earth. So these doshas are really just tools for creating balance. So when things go out of balance, we've got too much fire or too much earth or too much air, we can use the forces of the opposing dosha to bring ourselves back into balance.
So that's amazing. So there are 3 total.
Yeah,
Correct?
3 doshas. Yeah. So they all vary in quantity with the 5 elements. So air and space is vata, fire and water is pitta, and kapha is earth and water. But the dominant element in kapha is earth, and the dominant one is fire. But they all split off, these 5 elements split off into 2s to create the doshas, and each dosha is balanced by one of the other doshas. So it's this, it's this seesaw where we can say, okay, I've got too much air. Bringing the opposing element back into your body or your mind or your lifestyle to start to just come back into balance, so that we can do this on a daily basis, because Ayurveda teaches us that diseases there's usually a long manifestation of signs and symptoms and imbalance before we can actually start to recognize or materialize this, more significant problem. But if we can utilize this knowledge on a daily basis, we can start to bring ourselves back into balance every single day, even hourly if we need to, so that we're not getting that accumulation of imbalance that then causes bigger issues down the line.
Yes.
So this knowledge is really teaching us to become our own healers, because we're not going to go to the doctors, if we've got a little headache or feeling a little chesty, a little sinusy, something like that. We're not going to go to the doctor every time we do. And even if we did, they're often going to give us antibiotics or some other pharmaceuticals that are going to have all these other side effects. But if we can know, oh, okay, I've got a bit of fluid in my lungs, I'm feeling a bit, mucusy, we can say, okay, so that's kapha. So what I actually need to burn that off is a bit of heat. So using some more chili, some more spices, medicinal spices in your cooking is going to help to dissolve that. But for example, if you had too much pitta in your body, too much fire, and you're adding more fire to it, it's going to perpetuate that problem. So what they actually need is more cooling practices. So things like coconut water, aloe vera, all of the bitter greens that are going to cool the body and get that heat out of the body. So it's really personal, it's not one size fits all. We need to be fluid. We need to be able to work with this on a daily basis. And it can change for us really regularly. And it's just about tuning in, focusing on what's going on inside your body, creating that intuition, that connection with yourself, so that you can utilize this knowledge to bring yourself back into daily balance.
I love this. And it's like the perfect time I'm talking to you, because today of all days, I've been in such, great health, a lot of energy. And then today I just like something hit me where the congestion came in and kind of that, woozy head feeling. And I have a lot going on, right? But so I'm as you're talking, I'm like, oh, this is perfect timing, because that, when you start to feel like you're coming down with something, a head cold or something of that nature, what is it? You said bringing in some spices. So the kappa, correct?
Yeah. So if you wake up in the morning and you're feeling that way, you're feeling a bit flat, unenergized, a bit kind of head coldy, you can recognize, okay, so that if you're feeling heavy and like lethargic, it's prevalent that kapha is in the body, it's dominant. So what you want to do is balance that out with more of the pitta and a little bit of vata practices. So you just go with the opposing elements and the opposing dosha. So yes, exactly, adding a little bit more spice to give you that kick. Like spice is a bit like putting petrol in the car, like it gives you that that extra little bit of kick to get up and to get going and to shake things off. So I mean, obviously we want to, if your body is feeling like that, the best thing you can do is rest. So if you're feeling really lethargic, it's good to be able to honor that. You don't necessarily want to push through it. Sometimes we have to, but if you can, honor that rest and add those spices in that are going to naturally heat up and burn off and dispel any stagnation in the body, any congestion. And think of it as like you're stoking the fire from within. So you're kind of pushing it out to the surface, detoxing it, sweating it out, moving it through so you can kind of get up and get going.
This makes so much sense. Yep. Okay. That's a great.
If you woke up, on the other hand, and were feeling like springing out of bed at 5 a.m., burning through your food, diarrhea, hot flushes, headaches, the last thing you want to do then is add more spice. You want to actually do more of the opposite, more of those kapha practices, the cooling, like do a meditation, a gentle walk by a body of water, something really cooling. And a lot of people with too much fire want to go and burn that off. They want to do kickboxing, HIIT classes, go for an intense run. But what that's actually doing is adding more fuel to the fire. So we're always going in balance. We're trying to balance out that heat and intensity and bring yourself, back into your homeostasis.
Oh, it's so interesting. And how do you say, so out of the three, is there one that people typically tend to be more of?
So first of all, there's your prakriti, which is your innate constitution. So that's determined at the time of your conception, before you're even born. It's it's like your star sign, like it doesn't change throughout your life. That's your innate constitution. That can be seen through things like your bone structure, things that don't change. We can all put on weight and we can lose weight. We can change so many things about our physical appearance. But if we look at our bone structure, if you look at your hips, your wrists, your jawline, you can sort of start to determine your innate constitution, because it can change very quickly from the time we're born. So that actually doesn't change, but what does change is our vikriti. So that's our current imbalances. So from the moment we're born and we start being influenced by our parents, our siblings, our home environment, our community, our education system, siblings, friends, all of those things can start to move our vikriti. So that becomes fluid and that can be changing. And say, for example, a child is born and they're a vata child, that's their constitution. But they could be born into a household where there's, a lot of fighting, a lot of stress. The parents might separate. The child might lean on emotional eating. They might start binging. They might start becoming more withdrawn. They start gaining weight. And then we're looking at that child when they're 4 or something and saying, oh, they're a kapha child because they're a bigger build, more weight. But really, they could be a vata child since they were born with this kapha imbalance. So it's really tricky to, go back. We want to kind of go back in our mind to when we were children and have a look at how we were then before we were influenced by anything external. And the kapha children they're more introverted, more shy, more quiet. They like to play on their own. They're always clinging to mum's leg. They love the lolly bag. They love this piece of cake. Like they're very sweet and sensitive, emotional. But, you know, later in life, the Kapha type people become our nurses, our teachers, our healers. They're the very spiritual, connected, intuitive, because they're so sensitive, they feel everything. So they can connect with the spirit realm, plants, they have the patience, the slowness, the stability to stop and really be aware of their surroundings. And then the Pitta child is very active. They're more athletic build. So they've got more muscle definition and tone and strength. They've got the more athletic build. So like stronger shoulders, more, you know, thick kind of features. But yeah, Kapha is the most thick, I suppose. They're the most plump and luscious, whereas the Pitta is more athletic, more sporty. And they are the leaders, they're the politicians, but in childhood, they're the ones that are, you know, they want to play games by the rules, they want to keep score, they're bossing everyone around, telling them what to do, delegating whose roles are what. You know, they're very much regimented. They have to have 3 meals a day. They're not super fussy eaters, but they have to have their food, and they go a bit crazy if they don't. So they're like, they've got the fire in them. They've got the metabolisms burning. They want the structure, stability. They want to just keep going, and they're very regimented. Whereas a Vata child is the whimsical, creative, like, you know, chasing butterflies, friends with everyone, but not necessarily like knows all their names, or, you know, they're very like la la la, and they're more petite, they're more very thin features. So they've got like thinner hair, thinner lips, more brittle nails and skin and things like that. They're just little. Everything about them is quite little, and they're more prone to forgetfulness because they're just so, you know, I just imagine a little child, you know, twirling around in their dress, chasing butterflies, and like lost their friends, but they're just like in their own little world, very whimsical. So they're the childhood traits of each of the doshas. So if you can look back and kind of figure out, you know, what you were like as a child, you're going to have the best chance at finding your innate dosha. Because as I said, you know, you can have a kapha imbalance for 30, 40 years and not know that actually intrinsically you're a vata child, or vice versa. So that's a great way to look at it. But what we're really working with in Ayurveda is the vikriti, it's the imbalances. So our innate constitution is interesting, and we all love to know it and get to know that. But actually, we want to work with the imbalances because they're what's dominating us in the moment. So if we've got too much vata in the system, we want to make sure we're getting that into balance before we're looking at what our innate dosha is.
Okay. So with the innate dosha, is it like a birth chart where is it based on the day you're born, the time,
It's not. No, it's based on the time of your conception. So it's DNA from your parents, and usually will be similar to our parents in that if we have like a more kapha dominated family, it's likely that we will. It's not necessary, but it's not actually linked with our astrology, but there is Jyotish astrology in the Vedic system, which is really interesting. And that's obviously based on the time of our birth, but it's not really linked with our dosha.
Okay. So it's more linked with how we are just personality wise as a child.
Yes, it is. But our personality is inspired by our dosha. So the dosha comes first.
Okay.
So when we're conceived, we have our mother's and our father's DNA, and that determines the dosha we will be. And then once we're born, our dosha, our innate dosha, is going to influence how we show up in the world, what our personality is like, what our skin, our hair, our body type, what our trajectory in life is going to be. So the dosha is what's determining and influencing that. And then the imbalances can come and interrupt that. So we're always working with the imbalances to remove any obstacles so that we can be in flow with who we intrinsically are.
Right. Well, and as you're explaining this, it does seem like or sound a little bit like it can connect to the astrology based on, if you have a lot of air in your chart, right?
Yeah.
And or you
Yeah.
have a lot of water.
Yeah.
And the imbalance can come with those challenging planets that you could have that are maybe fire sign. So that maybe the way I'm seeing it a little bit, because I feel like I was probably that really intuitive, like quiet child,
Yeah.
very calm, like to play by myself, was totally fine.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of as I got older, I was much more, I had, the acne came in, a lot of stress around me in the family. And I was bossy as I got a little bit older, and I don't even know if maybe I was bossy when I was younger. I just didn't express it as much, but I started to, people would say that, to me if they were, one of my friends. So I started to maybe take on more of a fiery element as well,
And
right?
that can happen, if there is challenges within the family and you're feeling like, okay, I need to step up here. I need to take control. I need to take control of my life, or, potentially protect someone else in the family. You need to step up. So you're really stepping into your pitta, like the fire element is awakened within you. And then as a result of that, you can experience the acne, the more stress, the more bossy personality, but that usually comes from something in your environment influencing you and activating that element within you.
That's so interesting. So would that be considered an imbalance? Or
Yes,
okay.
yes. It's an excess of one of the doshas. And just so we know, we've all got all three doshas within us. So the doshas dominate different parts of our body and also different functions within our body. So we all have all three. They're just in varying quantities. So that's why they can become out of balance, because they're in there anyway. And when certain things activate different elements within us, that's when we get an accumulation of that particular dosha. And that's when we start to see the symptoms of that dosha in excess for our constitution.
Okay. So let's say, as this the reality of life takes over and we're full of stress, right? We're naturally very is it kappa?
Some people say kappa, some people, I say kapha.
Kappa. Okay. I feel like I'm saying, like, I was saying dasha, but it's dosha.
It's tricky because, it's Sanskrit and it's ancient. So, and we've all got different accents and different things. So, for me, I've always learned dosha and kapha, but plenty of people say dosha and kappa. So, I'm yet to know exactly, but I mean, I studied under a 17th generation Rinpoche, so he told me dosha and kapha, but who knows?
I will trust you on this 100%. So the kapha, if say you're more kapha and you're going through life, but I feel like this is my personal experience the past few months. The overwhelm has taken over, right? The vata has taken over, where I'm starting to feel overwhelmed in a way where I can't sleep. Right. My sleep has been interrupted because my mind is not stopping.
Yeah.
How do you bring something like that back into balance when it's, when we talk about the mind or in, thoughts, beyond meditation, right? Even though I do my meditations, it still seems to be out of control a little bit more at night.
Yeah. So, and back to your question you asked before, which dosha gets out of balance the most regularly? And it is Vata in our modern life, because it's so fast paced. We have so many responsibilities, so many people we're taking care of, so little time, so many financial obligations. There's so much pressure. It's this pressure cooker, and we're moving so fast through everything that Vata is this dosha that most commonly gets aggravated. It gets over accumulated in the body. And so what we need to do to balance that out is to call on the practices of kapha. So looking at things that are rich in kapha. So in terms of our diet, and this is a really great way that we can balance that out, is through having more root vegetables. So root vegetables are literally grown in the earth. So if you think about Vata, up in the clouds, go, 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 and then you come down to the earth, beetroots, carrots, sweet potatoes, things like that are grown in the earth. They're going to help to really pull us back down. So there's a whole diet and lifestyle that we can use to support any of the doshas. But outside of, the diet, like we've got lifestyle practices. So Abhyanga, self-oil massage, doing it yourself, is one of the best ways to balance Vata. So again, if our head's in the clouds, we've got so much in our mind, giving ourselves a warm oil massage brings us back into our body. So it takes the energy from up in our head back into our body, which helps to just restabilize and to clear out some of that fast-paced intensity that's going to show up while we're sleeping. So using some black sesame oil, because it's very grounding. It's the most Vata pacifying oil. You can take a little bottle. I use an oil burner and put it in there, but you can also just take a small bottle, like 100 ml bottle of the black sesame oil, and put the lid on and put it in a mug of boiling water so that the boiling water will warm up the oil, because Vata is air, so it's very cold. So we want warming practices. So warming up the black sesame oil, sitting on the floor and giving yourself, putting a towel down, giving yourself a beautiful slow. Vata's fast, fast, fast. So we want slow practices, warm practices, grounding, earthing practices. So a beautiful black sesame oil massage is wonderful. Also, if you can't do the whole body, just doing the soles of the feet. So before you go to bed, sitting by the edge of the bed, having some black sesame oil, just do the soles of the feet, because they're the opposite end from the head. So if all the energy is up here, bringing it down into the soles of your feet will really help to ground you. Also, walking barefoot on the earth will help to restabilize that energy, ground you, bring you back into your center. So there's all of these sorts of little practices, and obviously meditation is really helpful as well, just for coming back into the body. But also further to that, so we're all going to have influences of stress in our life. There's not much we can do in this modern day unless we want to go and live in a cave in India. We're going to have multiple responsibilities and sources of stress in our life. But what Ayurveda teaches us is that we can develop an anchor within our body where we're not affected by stress. We'll be affected to a degree, but all of us get affected by stress in varying ways and quantities. And when you've got a really strong, stable sense of self, a spiritual anchor, a physical anchor within your own body, this practice of self-love and self-care is developing that anchor. So you almost become untouchable. And it takes time. It takes, investment in yourself, investment in your time to make yourself a priority. And once you do that and you really value your happiness, your clarity, you have this sense, this wholeness, then these influences of stress become less detrimental to our mind, to our body, to our physical well-being, because the mind really is the control center for all of the processes that happen in the body, including the immune system, which is responsible for our defense, but also our cell rejuvenation and for cleansing out, harmful bacteria, foreign invaders, autophagy, which is the process of recycling and removing unwanted and dangerous cells from the body. So our immune system is responsible for all of that. But when we're in this state of stress, this heightened cortisol activates our fight or flight response. And when that's happening, all of the processes in the body have to take a back seat. So the immune system's turned off, the digestive system is turned off, and this is where disease starts to breed from. When we're not removing and eliminating and repairing, this is where we start to see disease arise. So it's so important to take care of the mind, to do these self-care practices, take care of your diet, do all the things that you can do to support your mind so that stress isn't invading the body.
Right. I feel like that is the precursor for disease, right? The more stress we have over the accumulation of time, it's almost like guaranteed you're going to have a breakdown of whether you're just going to get a terrible cold, or you just have that way of your body needs, just says, hey, we got to stop. There's an overload of toxicity.
Yeah. And you can have the best diet in the world. You can be eating all the right foods, taking care of your body. But if you're in a constant state of stress, you will still face imbalances, disease, aggravations. You'll still face all these things because stress is actually the most toxic poison of all. It's like compared to, drinking, smoking, drugs, all these things, it's like stress is the silent killer. And this is a really good example of just how potent stress is. So stress is essentially the cortisol hormone in the body. So when we encounter a stressful situation, our body releases cortisol. And when surgeons perform organ transplants, they inject the patient with heightened quantities of cortisol so that their body doesn't reject this new organ. So the doctors are putting in this foreign organ, someone else's organ, but by injecting them with cortisol, the body doesn't actually recognize that this is happening, and it can accept the new organ because it's not triggering. There's an intruder, there's something we need to remove. There's if you just did it without the cortisol, the body would try and kick it out and reject it straight away. But because it's under stress, it doesn't know. So the immune system is switched off. It's literally switched off. So that just shows, in our day and age, so many of us live in these elongated, constant states of stress. And when we're doing that, all of the cell rejuvenation and things that are supposed to be happening in the body literally just doesn't happen. It's a process that's switched off. So you can sort of start to see, we say stress is really bad for you, but you can actually start to see how dangerous it is and how much we need to do all of these practices that we can to prevent those feelings of stress. We're always going to have stress, but it's how we respond to it that makes all the difference.
Right. And it shows. I mean, look at somebody who's gone through a stressful situation, what they look like before and what they look like after. I feel I've experienced that. You look at the pictures prior to this, traumatic event, and you're like, wait a second, I look 10 years younger here. And then, so look at the presidents of all over the world.
That's so true. Are they 150? How are they still going? And they're 65. Something's going on here
for you. So it's so funny. But so you would say, going over all three of these, I feel like I'm, like you were saying, I'm a mixture of all of them, at this point. And it's almost like, how do you choose one? Do we need to choose just one, or do we not?
No, we don't need to choose one, So in terms of that innate constitution I was talking about earlier, people love to know that. And, it's interesting because it does determine our trajectory in life. So just for example, I'm Kapha. I'm very much Kapha. I do have Pitta, that's my drive, and I do have Vata because I'm very creative. But for me, my dominant dosha, so we're looking at the dominant one, I know that for me that's Kapha because I've really got to push myself to get going. I can be quite, stuck, I guess, stuck in the past a little bit, not, not really fiery. I'm not like, all right, it's 5 o'clock, let's get up, let's go, let's do this. I'm like, okay, I'm a creature of comforts. I love my self-care practices. I love going within. I love being alone. I love spirituality, exploring philosophy. I've always loved, alternative medicine, Ayurveda. I love teaching. It's like all of those things. I know that that's all Kapha, and I know that that's what I'm dominant by. And
Mm.
that's great to know because you can stop feeling like, oh, before I studied Ayurveda, it was like, oh, I just feel like I lack motivation. I really have to exercise a lot to keep my weight off. I could put on weight so easily if I stopped my practices, all those kapha qualities. But on the adverse of that, you're very sensitive, but because of that, you're very intuitive. You can have this relationship with nature that's much deeper than either of the other doshas. Kaphas age the best. We retain that water and the oil. So, less prone to premature aging, thicker qualities. So thicker hair, thicker lips, thicker skin. So you can start to find the polarities. You can start to find the pros and the cons, or the strengths and the weaknesses, and you can start to love yourself through, instead of just looking at the things we don't like about ourselves. We can start to know, okay, yeah, it's harder for me to keep my weight balanced, but because of that, I'm also going to age gracefully. I'm going to have thicker, more oily, luscious hair and skin and things like that. So you can start to look at, okay, yes, I do have this, which I don't love. I do have to work harder or exercise more, but at the same time, I have this is strength that balances that out. So for me, getting into Ayurveda, I was starting to go, wow, I can really see myself as an entire entity, and I can see that all of the things I don't like also have really positive tipping ends of the scale. So you can really start to get to know that, and that's interesting and that's comforting for sure. And I think I encourage everyone to explore that within themselves. And if you're looking for your dharma and your path in life, then understanding your innate constitution can help you find that. For example, if you're a pitta type person, you actually would be really good in a leadership role, whether it's starting your own business or being a team leader, going into more of a managerial kind of position. The politicians are all pitta type. So it's more of that, getting yourself into a place where you're going to actually feel really aligned and really alive.
Right.
Whereas for a vata type, these are your ballerinas, dancers, actors, artists. They're very whimsical and creative and light. They're light. So for them, if they're stuck in an office job where they can't move, they've got to stay still, they've got to concentrate all day, it just doesn't suit them. They need to be performing, moving, having diversity, traveling for work, things like that are going to stimulate them. Whereas getting a kapha person to do something like that, to be a ballerina, is just like, it's like, trying to push uphill. It's going, rowing upstream. It's like, it's just not going to feel aligned, and you're going to be forcing yourself, and it's going to be this real push-pull situation that just doesn't make you feel at ease. So when you can sort of start to get to know that, you can start to do the practices that are going to make you feel aligned. But in terms of bringing ourselves back into this daily balance with our physical and mental symptoms and imbalances, we don't need to identify with any of them. What we can do is wake up each morning. First thing you do, ask yourself how you're feeling today. Am I feeling excited and I just want to spring out of bed and start my day? I'm feeling really creative, optimistic. Okay, like there's a lot of vata there. If you're feeling like, oh gosh, stress, I've got this to do and that to do, but you get up and you're making your coffee and doing all your things and it's like, go, go, go. That's pitta. If you're waking up and you just want to hit snooze on the alarm, you don't want to get up, you want to stay in bed, there's kapha. And if you're feeling too much of one of those, then you can start to go, okay, I'm feeling really kapha. So I need to call on some practices that are going to balance me out. And if you don't know the doshas, the names of the doshas and the qualities of the doshas, just think about the elements. They're much easier to work with. So kapha, you're feeling heavy. You're feeling earth is the heaviest of all of the elements. So it goes in order from light to heavy, lightest being space or ether. That's like out there in the cosmos, literally space, and then to air. So there's a bit more movement, but it's still really light. And then it goes into fire, hot, sharp, but still blazing, and then water, and then earth. So earth is the accumulation of all of the elements, but in air and space, there's no fire, water, or earth yet. And then in fire, there's air, space, and fire. And then in water, air, space, fire, water, and then earth is all of it. If you think about our planet, we're on Earth, we have all of those elements. But if you're up in space, there's only space up there, there's no earth. So you look at that sort of sliding scale and you wake up and you go, I'm feeling heavy, I'm feeling dormant, I'm feeling stagnant, I'm feeling inflamed, I'm feeling fluidy, I'm feeling all of the elements. Then you want to work your way up. You want to go up to the highest, balance that out. So air and space, it's that light, creative, movement, free-flowing, social. So to get out of that kapha funk, you want to do some of those practices, light, creative, social. So you might get up and you might just do some journaling. That's creative, it's light, it's free-flowing. So instead of getting up and being like, I need to go for a run and I need to do all these things that are going to be really undesirable for you, just start to encourage some of those more light and whimsical practices that are just going to help you to shake that funk. So doing some journaling, socializing, going and having a coffee with a girlfriend, getting out of your own head, out of your own body. What's really amazing for kapha is group activities. So doing a yoga class with a group of people, because kapha can be very isolated and introverted. It's actually, we always want to go. It's funny. I always say, do the opposite of what you feel like doing. So if you feel like a kapha person, if they wake up like that, they're going to want to have breakfast in bed. They don't want to see anyone. They don't want to do anything. They just want to lay around. And that's just perpetuating more of that earth dormant energy. The last thing they want to do is get up out of bed, go and do a group, netball game or yoga class or Pilates. Like that's the last thing they want to do. But that's showing you that that is how you're going to balance yourself out. That's how you're going to get to the opposite end of the spectrum. And at the end of that class, they'll feel amazing. Whereas if they stay in bed all day, they will feel shocking and they will never get out of it. And just, like attracts like, and opposites create balance. So, whereas on the other hand, if you're waking up and you're feeling very vata, or you're a vata person, or you've got a vata imbalance, you actually don't need to go and do a group yoga class or a group Pilates class. What you actually need to do is stay alone, meditate, ground down, quiet, like be in your house, do everything slowly, go and make yourself a nourishing, grounding breakfast with either some gentle music or no music, not like podcast this, flatmates, going out for coffee, seeing all the girls. Like that's just going to make you more vata, more air, more whimsical, more like you haven't got your projects done, you don't know where you are, what you're doing, you're just like going out with the day and just seeing where it takes you. Right. It's like the opposite of what you need. So what we're really, really working with is how we feel. But you can go through a day and feel, You can wake up in the morning, feel really kapha and don't want to get out of bed, but you do your Vata practice and you start to feel good. And then you might go to work and you might have an argument with your boss and you get really hot-headed, really angry, really triggered, start sweating, you're just feeling really stressed. And then you see there's too much fire. So you've gone from being really caffeine, really earthy, to
Yeah.
feeling really fiery in the space of a few hours. You might have road rage on the way to work, and then already in 2 hours, you've got too much fire, too much heat. So instead of having, a spicy curry that you've packed for lunch when you're in this state of stress and heightened fire, you might choose to go for a walk around the block, go outside, cool down, fresh air, and then have like peppermint tea, chamomile tea, a coconut water, something that's going to help to remove some of that fire from the body and have more of a cooling meal. So something more based in like your green veggies, something like that, even a warm salad, something like that that's going to not perpetuate that fire. And then
Right.
by the time you get home, because you've been socializing all day, you've seen all these people, you feel really vatary. You feel really like, oh, I've just gotten home. What have I got to do now? I don't know. So you might be feeling really airy in that space. You've had a big day. You've got so much to do. So then you want to call on like those kapha practices. So you might just take 5 minutes to meditate. You might cook yourself a root veggie dinner, something with root veggies, more grounding food, some grains, things like that that are going to balance you out. So you can go through, all of the full spectrum of the doshas in one day, in a few hours. So it's just about tuning in each moment and asking yourself how I feel. If you're preparing your food, your lunch, your breakfast, your dinner, whatever, and just checking in and say, what do I need right now? Do I need to feel lighter or do I need to feel more grounded? Do I need to feel more spicy, more get things moving, or do I need to slow things down? It's just like always tuning in and recognizing. And when you do that, your body starts to learn that you trust it. You start to create this center where it's like the body knows what it needs, and you allow that spaciousness for the mind to check in and go, what do you need? I'm here for you. I honor you. And the body's going to tell you, okay, well, I'm feeling really, hot-headed or really whatever. I need to cool and ground down. Can we just chill? And you do that, and you honor your body. The body then can heal, it can repair, it can relax, your nervous system can chill. And then when those stressful things pop up, you're not so worried about it. It's like, it's okay, we've got this. We'll move through this. I trust you, you trust me. And it's this love language. It's this relationship with ourself that can really help to create that center.
Yeah, no, and in the way you're describing it, it's like literally it's all about just staying in balance and keeping your body as in alignment as possible. So
Yeah.
I'm as you're talking, like yeah, that would be right. If you're really feeling angry at your boss or angry in an angry situation, do something that cools yourself down instead of diving into the fire. So it's just yeah, it makes complete sense to me. Now,
And Ayurveda does, once you start to get this and break it down, it goes from being this Sanskrit, ancient, foreign, mystical, whoa
yeah,
thing to being common sense. You
right.
start going, I can totally see how that makes sense. Too much fire, cool it down, don't add more fire. It's like when you start to get to know it, it becomes so intuitive that you don't even need to think about it. It just flows.
Mhm. So for somebody who's starting out, who might need a little bit more guidance, of maybe it's just writing down different things they can do when they're feeling a certain way. Do you have a guidebook for that? Do you have that information on your website, or do they contact
In
you?
my book, Ayurvedic rituals. So there's a whole chapter on on the doshas and all of the practices, the forms of movement, the forms of food, drinks, teas, all of that is all in the book. There's like a very detailed chart on how to recognize and then how to pacify all of them. So that's all in there. But also I think for someone super new, it's just like we were talking about with those elements, just sort of finding out where you are within those elements, feeling either light or heavy, and then using the opposing ones to balance it out. And if all else fails, do the opposite of what you feel like. That's like the most simple way, because as I mentioned, it's like the balance is going to realign our homeostasis.
Right. And it's such a Libra, everything we're talking about feels like so Librarian. It's like
Yes,
keeping it in balance.
definitely.
And as much as I thought, hey, I must have been the Vata child, I feel like I'm the Pitta, for sure. I mean, you're describing that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's more
And
me.
you know what the great thing about Pitta is, that Pittas are the ones that get the job done. So we can all work together really well. So Vatas generally are really conceptual, really creative. So they might have great ideas, but Vatas struggle sometimes to get things done because there's so much movement in them. They have this idea and then they have this idea, and they start a million things, but they don't get them finished. Whereas they buddy up with a Pitta, the Pitta is going to be the one, they help them get it done. They finish it, they bring it to life. And so there's we can, once we start to know this, we can sort of start to utilize it in our business and in our life and in our relationships, our partnerships. Like, these are all ways that we can find a lot of compatibility.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it exactly as you're describing it. Yeah. You can use it pretty much anywhere as a tool, just another tool to move forward through this crazy world we're living in.
Yeah. And it helps us to understand others and to accept them. Like, I lived with a guy when I was in my 20s, and he was so Vata, and I had no idea what Vata was at that stage, but he'd get up in the morning, he was super loud, banging all the cupboards, doing all the things. He'd go out, he'd get in his truck, he'd come back in like 3 times, forgotten his keys, forgotten his phone, forgotten his wallet. And I was just like, oh my God, this guy is so useless. But he's such a lovely, light, sweet person. And now I look back and I go, he's the quintessential Vata man, just like head in the clouds, this like baby giraffe, just like walking around, knocking things over, stubbing his toe, just like la 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 la. But he was such a sweetheart. And
Right.
now I'm just like, oh, it's Vata. That was so sweet. He's just a Vata. He's not like this space cadet. He's just a Vata type. And that's
Right.
that's just who he is intrinsically. And when we can start to see that in our friends, our family members, people we live with, people we work with, we can actually start to accept them and embrace them for who they are, more so than just judging them with these labels, So I think it just ricochets in all areas of our life, from our diet to the way we move, to the way we treat ourselves, to the products we use, even the clothing and the colors and materials that we wear. Like, all of it is connected with a dosha and with the elements. So it's just a beautiful way to accept, embrace ourselves, others, and to really support ourselves throughout all of the phases of life.
Right. Oh, thank you so much. That
My
was
pleasure.
that was such a wonderful conversation. And I really do feel like you were able to give our listeners just this wealth of information on a topic that I think a lot of us have spoken about just here and there. And your book is really what opened my eyes to a lot of things in the Ayurvedic world, and making my own eye cream and doing all of those things, right? So, but yeah, the idea of it being such an ancient tradition and such an ancient language and all the things, that it makes it almost hard to decipher, but the way you explain it is, it's just, yeah, perfect and direct and to the point, and what I think everyone needs to hear. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's been, I mean, I remember the first time I heard about the doshas in college, and it's like, it's taken me, I've been practicing Ayurveda for 6 or 7 years now, and it has literally taken me this long to get my head around it in this way and to be able to explain it in this way. Because at first it's like, Vata dosha, what? Air and space? Like, what? It's like, it took so long. And I think it was in the process of writing the book, of like really going back to basics and simplifying it, that I went, oh my God, these are just tools for balance. These are tools to help us find balance. Like, it just had never been explained to me in that way. It just seems so mystical. And I feel that now, after revisiting it, writing about it, talking about it so much on podcasts and all these kinds of things, that I've now been able to see it in this way that can kind of, I guess, fast forward a lot of the theory for people who just want to know in a really practical sense what they can do. So it's
Yeah.
definitely been a journey. And as you can probably tell, like, I'm just really passionate about sharing it in these ways that does help to break it down, because I want everyone to get to know Ayurveda, get to apply it to their life without having to do years of study. And, I'd rather everyone has a little Ayurveda than to just think, oh, that's too hard, that's too foreign. Where do I begin?
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
And I will say, for anyone who is interested and maybe does find your book, start out small. I
Mm.
will say that I bought so many different things, ingredients, to try to make so many different things, that I became that airy fairy person where I was only able to do so many. And then I just kind of was like, okay, wait, I have to take it one step at a time, instead of like starting my own Ayurvedic business of
We get so excited. We're like, oh my God, I want to do it all. I want all of it. I want to make it all.
I'm gonna do
And the
my
way that I actually, yeah,
so
the way that I kind of wrote the book and laid the book out is that it's the sort of book you can literally pick up on your coffee table, flick to a page, read that, put it back down, come back to it 2 weeks later, flick to another page, make one of those recipes. It's not a novel. It doesn't need to be written and read page by page. It's something you can come back to. And I always like to remind people, I guess, that Ayurveda has been with us for thousands of years. Actually, if you look at the elements, it's space, it's earth. Ayurveda has always existed. It's an eternal science. There was never a time where these elements didn't exist, because otherwise there would be no earth, there would be no space. So it's been there forever, and it will continue to be there forever. And it's something that we can develop a relationship with over time. Whether we're living in an Ayurvedic lifestyle or not, Ayurveda is still there. It's still our connection to the elements, our environment, the Mother Nature, the seasons.
yeah.
So it's just about developing this relationship, cultivating this relationship over time. It's not like, oh, I'm doing an Ayurvedic diet for 2 weeks and then I'm not. It's like, it's always going to be there. It's just about us, just growing and learning with it and developing that over, a lifetime, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a last note, it was really hard. I don't think I ever was able to find, but black sesame oil. I
Okay.
found all kinds of sesame oils at different health food stores, and I think I just stopped my search because I didn't trust what I was seeing online either, because it was mostly on Amazon or things like that.
Mm.
I don't necessarily know where that's processed and where is it going to come from,
Yeah.
and do I want to, put it in my stuff. So what would your suggestion be?
Well,
Or is
you're so lucky that you live in the States, because the most amazing brand, Ayurvedic brand, is Banyan Botanicals.
oh,
It's incredible. They grow a lot of their own ingredients on their own farms. Everything is certified organic. They use top quality ingredients. They're sustainable. They give back. They give grants to the Ayurvedic community. I believe it was begun by Dr. Vasant Lad, who's a bit of a godfather of Ayurveda. I believe he started the company, but they're quite a big company. They've got an amazing website, amazing blogs. It's a really good resource. They
Okay.
have wonderful dosha quizzes as well. So Banyan Botanicals sell really beautiful organic cold pressed black sesame oil. So yeah, we can get some of them in Australia, but they're usually through different distributors. But yeah, it's all made in the States. So yeah, check them out for sure.
I will, and that's good to know because I don't know if it's just not a typical thing they carry at the markets here, or if
Mm.
it's something.
No, it's
Um,
rare everywhere.
okay.
It's rare everywhere because you can get a lot of the toasted white sesame
Yeah.
oil, and that's used as a cooking oil,
Right.
but you want untoasted black sesame oil, so cold pressed. So it is hard to also find here. We've got an Australian brand as well, but Banyan, I would say, would be my top pick, and you can buy it in bulk quantities, and they've got loads of other products and Ayurvedic herbs and things like that as well.
Okay. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.